So if you were online at all last week, you probably saw this graphic that President Donald Trump tweeted out saying sanctions are coming using a kind of fake Game of Thrones font. You might have wondered, so what are sanctions, which sanctions, and why are they coming? Sanctions are a tool that countries use against other countries to try and change their behavior economically instead of, fighting a war or something. Lately, in the news, you might have heard a lot about sanctions on Iran, which is what President Trump was referring to here. A bunch of sanctions were put back into place on Iran as of Monday that prohibits other countries from buying Iranian oil. If they do, that means that the U.S. will punish them. Let's walk through a couple of scenarios about how sanctions work. Russia was put under U.S. sanction back in 2014 after it invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. More sanctions were put on Russia after the 2016 election when it was accused of interfering in how the election went down. The sanctions are both for sectors, the defense sector, the energy sector, the mining sector. They're also on individuals, those people who are closest to President Vladimir Putin. When individuals are sanctioned, that could mean a range of things. It could mean that the U.S. seizes their assets that are in U.S. banks. It could mean a travel ban where they are not allowed to come to the U.S. The question is, though, have these sanctions changed Russia's behavior? Experts would say not so much right now. Russia is still in Crimea, and while Russia has said they did not meddle in the 2016 election, that is up in the air whether or not they actually still are trying to interfere in the U.S. election process. Now let's move back to Iran. The unilateral sanctions from the U.S. go all the way back to the Iranian Revolution. Those sanctions are embargo on doing business at all by any American with any Iranian company. Basically, an embargo on the whole country. There are certain ones that are in place only because of Iran's nuclear program, and those are the ones that we're most focused on right now. Some of those sanctions were lifted under the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. In exchange for Iran shutting down most of its nuclear program, they would lift many of the sanctions that were put in place at the United Nations and unilaterally. Since coming into power, President Trump has been extremely committed to undoing the effects of the Iran deal. He pulled out of the deal unilaterally in May, and since then has been slowly rolling the U.S.'s sanctions back into place. The most recent set involved what are called secondary sanctions. If a European business does business with Iran's oil sector, then that company will then fall under U.S. sanctions and be banned from using the U.S. financial sector. And since the dollar is still king in the world, that's a really big deal. So the bigger question now is, are those sanctions going to be effective? Well, one can argue that the previous round of sanctions did have an effect. Iran came to the table, they negotiated, the Iran nuclear deal was worked out, ta-da, sanctions worked. But this new round of sanctions is the U.S. only. It doesn't have the weight of the world behind them. The Trump administration thinks that doesn't really matter, that the U.S. economy is so strong and so connected to the world that Europe and others will bow to the whims of the U.S., and Iran will come back to the table to negotiate a deal. Whether that's actually the case remains to be seen.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.